Dangerous is here. It's out, it's available everywhere, and it's time to talk about it. There was a lot of hype coming into this album and a lot of pressure on Morgan to produce a solid album at least. The sophomore slump is a very real thing. An artist's second album is crucial to the ensuing direction of their career. It separates the one-year wonders from the true forces in the present industry. So because of how massive Morgan has become in the last year or so, and the sheer amount of momentum he had coming off the universal success of 7 Summers, his Makeup SNL performance, and the demos he put out almost a year ago, Morgan couldn't afford to put out anything but a monstrous album. So what did he do? He announced his second album, Dangerous, was going to be a double album just to raise expectations and anticipation even higher than they already were. I think the logical first questions regarding the album are, is it good and does it justify a double album containing 30 songs with a runtime of 97 minutes? I was going to do 2 separate videos for each album, but I opted for a single album review of the entire cohesive project. That said, I'm going to be discussing album 1 first, then album 2, and then conclude with some final thoughts on the album as a whole. Without further ado, let's see if Dangerous lived up to the hype. Album 1 opens with Sand in My Boots, which is one of, if not arguably, the best songs on the entire project. As far as album openers go, Sand in My Boots is one of the strongest in recent memory. I think a curveball right off the bat was a smart move. This isn't your typical Morgan Wallen track. It's a slower, more heavy-hearted cinematic piano ballad with more interesting songwriting than I was expecting for the opener. It's a somber story about a girl who he saw a future with, but she ended up being a no-show, so all he brought back home was some sand in his boots. And I think it's a smart attention grab of an opener, simply because this isn't the stereotypical Morgan sound, so I think listeners who are expecting a shallow party-style double album will be caught off guard and more likely to continue listening. From there, however, the album transitions into what will be one of the most divisive tracks on the whole project, but also plays as an introduction into easily the strongest stretch of the entire double album. From Wasted on You until Neon Eyes, we enter what I would consider the powerhouse of the record. It's easily the most modern and experimental run of songs Morgan's ever released. Wasted on You is a bitter breakup track, just talking about all Morgan wasted on this girl thinking she was the one. The elephant in the room is the fact that it is a blatant trap song. A lot of people are going to immediately dismiss this song because of the trap beat, which I understand. If you're a traditional fiddle and steel kind of guy, this probably isn't the track for you. What I don't want to happen is for people to call it bad simply because of the trap beat, because when you dive deeper, it's actually pretty freaking good. I'm normally against country artists incorporating rap or trap elements into their music, but that's mostly because all previous attempts just felt shallow, inauthentic, or a sad attempt to win some fans over from other genres. However, that's simply not the case with Wasted on You. A lot of this opening section has a very dark, late-night vibe to it, so a well-produced, intentionally implemented trap beat over a bluesy, bitter breakup song in 6/8 time works exceptionally well. Trap percussion is very aggressive and in your face, which works with songs of an aggressive nature like Wasted on You. Even trap artists will opt for more organic percussion on a slower song because it's not what trap beats are for, but when it's used properly by a modern artist like Morgan, the end result is a very well-made track that ultimately fits the grand scheme of the album with this late, rainy, sad boy vibe. Quickly to clarify, I'm not in any way arguing it's a country song by any stretch, I'm just arguing it's a good piece of music that fits and makes sense in the context of this album. The album brightens up a little through tracks like Somebody's Problem and More Surprised Than Me, where Morgan not only puts his charming and comedic songwriting on display, but he also incorporates much more traditional instrumentation with banjos and brushed drums, while still having his distinctive style all over it. More Surprised Than Me, I think, is one of the standouts. There's a really playful ascent up the banjo, and the way Morgan mirrors it with his melodies is just super likable. I love the line about buying a Harvard sweater to see if people will think he's smarter. All this track is saying is nobody's more surprised than Morgan that he was able to get this girl, but I like it. Not every song has to reinvent the wheel, and this is a great example of an incredibly simple song that has an end product of high quality and likability. 865 is another songwriting highlight. This is where the vignette starts thickening again and the mood shifts back to the heavy-heartedness I was mentioning earlier. Light but prominent organic percussion with wavy electrics and backup vocals, but like I said a moment ago, the songwriting steals the show for me. Rather than saying the taste of the bottle reminds Morgan of this girl he's missing, the bottle reminds him of her phone number. The hook is also just really fun to sing along to, which definitely helps it. 865-409-1021. With Warning, we're officially back in this dark, heavy mood. This and Neon Eyes really focus back in on this late night vibe I was talking about earlier, and Warning is another track that's super out there in nature. There's no true boundaries on a track like Warning, and one thing I really appreciate is that when Morgan ventures outside the box, he goes the full mile, making the end product much more satisfying than if he tried to keep it country at the same time. Warning again incorporates a more trap-inspired beat, as well as some nice sharp synthesizer-style wind chimes, almost After Hours-esque. I really enjoy the subtle but present 808 really grounding the song, and there's so much going on you just get swallowed up in the atmosphere. Sirens, pianos, glitching hi-hats, it's really a production and arrangement treat. I think Warning is one of the best bridges on the whole album as well, and just how the instrumental strips down and we get a complete change of pace and melodic direction. Neon Eyes, like I said, another pleasing country blend with lush R&B influences. I absolutely love the hook of this song, the offsetting rhythm and how comfortably Morgan rides the instrumental, really bobbing and weaving through the heavier moments, allowing every aspect to be on full display. While we're here, this would also be my pick for the next single from this album. I think it has the most mass appeal in terms of pleasing the dedicated country fans while also satisfying those more casual or poppy listeners. I just think Neon Eyes really captures the general vibe of the first album really well. Bars and alcohol with neon and heartbreak, all tied together with super modern and creative approaches at country production blended with other genres. It also has clever lyrics hidden around every corner, and I always love when some good songwriting gets pushed in today's country music world. The remainder of the first album is up and down for me. Outlaw being one that has just failed to grow on me. I appreciate the western saloon style they went for, but it just sounds out of place. I just don't know where this could have fit on the project if I'm being real. It has some great melodies like the end of the chorus, but the songwriting leaves a lot to be desired. The love complex, if anything, just softens up this whole tough western image they're trying to paint, and Ben Burgess, though he sang his rear end off and sounded great, is just way too similar to Morgan when he gets his vocals anywhere off the ground. You guys thought Hardy and Ashland Kraft sounded too similar? Try Ben Burgess and Morgan Wallen. I literally didn't know who was singing at some points. Whiskey My Way is one I hope gets the recognition it deserves. It's another track in this swingy 6/8 time signature, which is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But this time the rhythm is used in a more traditional, longing country manner. Morgan just has a charming personality, and he can be really sweet when he goes for these lighter romance or longing style tracks. Either way, it's another song that isn't reinventing the wheel, but is one of the best sounding tracks and just has a sweet sentiment that's easy to get behind. Morgan was having trouble getting over this girl, and nothing was working, so he had to whiskey his way over her. Wondering About the Wind, though one of my favorites, came as a bit of a disappointment to me. I still love this song, but I've been in love with it since April 2020 when he released the demo during lockdown. With the demo released in April, it was the absence of percussion and the use of ambient background vocals that gave this song such a smooth flowing vibe, almost like an intentional lack of direction, like the blowing of wind. I do enjoy the structured percussion near the end, providing a nice climax to one of my favorite songs, but they should have held back from implementing the hard drums straight out of the gates. It's too much too soon for me. We get shades of this breezy vibe in the beginning of the final chorus, but it's just not enough to truly satisfy me or do the original version justice. So though I can see myself going back to this one quite often, I am only left to my imagination of what could have been done. Your Bartender was a dud for me. It sounds fine. Morgan sounds very at home with it. It has some nice hooks. The songwriting is just uninspired in my opinion. With a title like Your Bartender, he could have done so much more, but rather he just lists all these scenarios where he could have potentially convinced this girl to stay, even though we have no insight whatsoever on the actual breakup situation he's singing about. The Chris Stapleton feature leaves me with a similar feeling that I got from Does to Me by Luke Combs and Eric Church. I think the song itself is decent, nothing crazy, it's just that they failed to take advantage of what would have taken this track to its full potential. They get these massive harmonies in the first chorus, and you're ready for a big Chris moment, then all we get is a subdued Chris in the second verse, and then he effectively disappears after that. They never give Chris the spotlight to really take off with his massive vocals and show off why everyone fell in love with him in the first place. To be fair to Morgan, as you'll find all over this record, he really pushes his vocal limits and it's really nice to listen to, this being an example, but Chris is one of those voices that you logically speaking should have to give the lead to at some point. The album rounds out with the 3 tracks we had beforehand. I think all 3 of these are phenomenal, including easily one of the best covers we've ever heard of Jason Isbell's Cover Me Up. One thing I like about the ending of this record is how it begins to open up a little, get breezy, transitioning into this warmer, bright summer vibe that goes nicely into the general vibe of the second album. I've ranted about More Than My Hometown and 7 Summers Enough, so I'll spare you guys this time, but if you're new, I think these 2 tracks are to die for, and you can hear more about them in almost all of my Year Rewind videos, which you should check out. Even in the context of the album, both tracks still blend nicely and don't sound out of place. Overall, first album, very strong. Metaphorically, it was on wobbly legs from Outlaw until Cover Me Up, but especially when you take into consideration just how good the opening half and closing trio are, with some fantastic moments in that unsteady section, it's hard to argue with this record. Is this a country album? That's open for debate, though personally I would say this is a country music album. The majority of it is rooted in country, but there's also shades of R&B quite consistently mixed within. I think if you're going to argue it isn't a country album, my question to you is where would you place it? There's R&B moments, but nowhere near enough to consider it an entire R&B project. It's not pop, because this isn't even pop country, especially on the first album to begin. There's a trap beat on one or two of the tracks here, but other than that, I don't know how you've placed this anywhere but country. Is it a carbon copy of Willie Nelson's greatest hits? No, and it shouldn't. Morgan is a young superstar appealing to the younger generation in a world that embraces the blending of genres more than ever before. And let's be honest, nobody's doing pop or R&B country blends better than Morgan right now. Good music is good music. Album 1's almost incomparable, which is truly admirable. For Morgan to sit down and make a piece of music that doesn't sound like anything else in today's oversaturated music industry is really just a testament to the creativity and dedication to make something special. Another thing that stood out to me is how diverse yet in sync this record feels. We really get the full spectrum here, from Sand in My Boots to Whiskeyed My Way to Wasted on You. Morgan really goes just about everywhere, but it never feels like a mess or uncoordinated. Unlike If I Know Me, the transitions are much smoother, the mood changes at the right times. Listening through, I was never wishing we were in a certain tone for any less or any more than we were. In conclusion, album 1, very, very strong. The creativity and lack of accurate comparisons is admirable, like I said, and the songwriting really surprised me at times. With that, we're going to move on to album 2. Album 2, the obvious people-pleaser, party anthem side of the album. But is it actual quality music or mindless, underwhelming country mosh pit anthems for when he comes back to Boots and Hearts, which he said had his favorite crowd of all time? Just a little Canadian pride for y'all. If I'm being real, the second album takes a little longer than I would have liked to get going. Still Going Down, in fairness, does sound really great, but the sound starts the album on the wrong foot in my opinion, and the songwriting falls flat. Just another hey look, I'm a country boy style song. It's just too defensive and also just holds on to that melancholy vibe from the first album, rather than being a get up off your feet style song. It almost sounds bitter as well and just sets the album in the wrong mood. Rednecks, Red Letters, Red Dirt is good. There's nothing outstandingly bad or great about this song, it's just present within the album. Though Morgan finds some interesting cadences and flows, he does that all over the record, so that alone wasn't able to take this song to the level I was hoping for to kick off the obvious party side of the album. That said, I do think it has a more appropriate sound than Still Going Down, simply because this track has a brighter, new day, uplifting feeling that Still Going Down was missing. After 17 tracks, we finally arrive at the title track, and given the location of this song on the track list, it's exactly what I wanted from it. It's a fun, quick-paced, feel-good summer song, pop country production that's super fun. It's a very Morgan pop country song. It's basically about Morgan choosing to stay home and keep doing him, rather than going downtown and doing what he knows will only hurt him in the long run. It's basically post-warning Morgan learning from his mistakes. Either way, it's a super fun track that does the job perfectly. My only issue with this track is it's slightly too fast. Whether everything about the song was recorded at the actual tempo the song is played in, it goes so fast that it just ends up feeling artificially sped up. Like, he is going on this track. It's like, I don't want to go downtown, doing what we used to. I get the fast energy it's looking for. I just think slowing it down by a few beats per minute would have gone a long way. That said, that is not any sort of deal breaker. I still really enjoyed this track. From there, however, we dip right back down into what could be my least favorite song on the whole double album. Be or Don't is a big fat dud for me. Big and fat because it's this big, heavy, fat rock sound, and dud because it's a dud. You can argue there's some clever lines with how the lyrics fall into the next line. It's just too shallow for me. I love dumb songs, as you'll see later. This one just doesn't do it for me. Morgan doesn't sound as at home on this rock style. It's a Hardy co-write, and maybe Hardy could have saved this track, seeing as he's more geared towards this rock sound. I just don't think Morgan does enough to potentially save it, as if a different singer could. Ultimately, Morgan's one of the most charismatic artists today, allowing him to get away with a lot, so if he couldn't pull it out of the hole, I don't know if anyone could. Although Hardy is the only person I could see maybe proving me wrong about this track. From there, though, we move into Blame It On Me. I knew a track like this was coming. I was just hoping it would be of quality, and it is. A comedic pop country good time track. This isn't an insult, but Morgan just sounds better on pop or R&B country blends than rock in my opinion. I know I've said that country and rock go better together than country and pop, but every case is different, and in this case, especially after the first album, I just think Morgan sounds more natural and comfortable on country songs with more R&B style influences. I get the whole tough guy persona country artists try to put on, but funny, clumsy Morgan is just more appealing in my opinion. Blame It On Me is hilarious. It's literally Morgan talking to this girl he was with, saying sorry if I set your standards too high, or if you just can't dip back down to the city boy level. If that's the case, you can blame it on me for giving you the time of your life. Just listen to the passive-aggressive sass of these lyrics. Forgive me if I set the bar too high. It's my bad if you had the time of your life. I love that subtle shade he's throwing, and it's done in a jumpy, fun manner. Somethin Country and What You Think of Country Now are essentially saying the same thing, and it isn't saying much. Both are just, hey, let's go do country stuff, and I can list you set activities we could do. Quickly, Somethin Country sounds like Midnight Queen by Nickelback in the beginning of the chorus. Out of the two, I would take What You Think of Country Now, just because it has a slightly more country sound, and I prefer the hook of the chorus. The funky nature just works better for me. Still has that country rock, country stereotype style. I just prefer What You Think of Country Now. So in hindsight, they easily could have scrapped Somethin Country, but I get it. Morgan's a rowdy guy, and he needs some mosh pit songs. I just don't see the need for both, seeing as they aren't really offering anything too special. Track 8, which I can't exactly say, was the song I had the lowest expectations for out of the entire double album, but the end product could not have been better for what I went in imagining. This is a fun party song with some clever lyrics. Similar to Beer Don't, the cleverness of the lyrics is found in how each of the lines blend into the next. I just love this cowbell country Morgan so much more. There's just so much to like about this song. This is what I want in my get-up songs, and I cannot get enough of the line, lose my Dodge Ram mind. I love that subtle but comedic censor. Oh, and I love how Morgan throws his little yeah all over the track. It just adds that extra character. This bar seems really out of place for me. Great song, don't get me wrong, I just would have put it later in the album. If anything, it interrupts the rowdy vibe the album was building up, and it loses its sentiment when sandwiched between Somethin Country and Country Yada Yada. Me on Whiskey is when we start winding down on album 2 and the album collectively. Like I said during Whiskey My Way, we get another episode of this romantic schmaltzy Morgan. Morgan again blending the subtle R&B, and it works so good. It has an intoxicated, sleazy vibe, which it should. Personally, this is one of my favorite hooks on the whole project as well. This track just goes down really easily, and even though I shouldn't, simply due to how it's delivered, I can't get enough of when Morgan quickly sings. It's kind of our thing. From there, we are at Need a Boat, which quickly I would have swapped the order of Need a Boat and Me on Whiskey. However, Need a Boat is one of the best songs Morgan has ever put out. Talk about scratching that itch. I knew he would, but this just confirms how good Morgan sounds on a fun uber country style song. Big shades of Brad Paisley and Alan Jackson. It's like Morgan's Chattahoochee moment. Fun, stupid song about fishing with some of the best production Morgan has ever released. Steel everywhere. Harmonies present. Electric licks everywhere. One of the most satisfying acoustic riffs is also found in the beginning of the final chorus. Just the head-bobbing, good-feeling 90s summer sound is so refreshing. If this gets released as a single as we get closer to summer, my life would probably be complete. Seriously, if I hear that on the radio while driving by the beach, I will be a complete human. With that, we're officially in the final section. Silverado for Sale is one I personally love, like adore, but even from my critical, unbiased reviewing frame of mind, it's a darn good song. Sound aside, because though it sounds great, it's nothing new at this point. It's one of, if not the sweetest stories Morgan has ever told in a song. It's saying how Morgan wants to settle down with his girl, but they don't have the money, so he decides to sell his truck. I love the progression in the context of the chorus. The lyrics themselves don't change, but the meaning behind it does. The first chorus is Morgan reading what he's going to tell the newspaper to put under the advertisement. The second chorus is this teenage boy reading the advertisement and just having his eyes light up. And then after a sweet little moment where Morgan's talking on the phone, the final chorus is Morgan explaining the sentiment and advantages of the truck to the boy as he finalizes the deal. It's almost a tearjerker of a track. It definitely gives me goosebumps when Morgan pours his soul into the final chorus. The bittersweet yet proud tone of Morgan's voice just wraps it up with a bow on top. Easily one of my favorite songs across the board from this double album. We then move into the trio to close the show, Heartless and Livin the Dream, which we've already received prior. Quickly, I'm very thankful it's the Wallen version of Heartless. It just fits better than the Diplo. The trap moments were saved for the first album. This second album is much more organic, so I'm glad they chose to keep it that way. At first, I thought it was an awkward transition from Silverado for Sale, but it's grown on me as this transition back into the late night, heavy-hearted vibe the project opens with, like the whole project essentially comes full circle. Livin the Dream we've all heard. It's Morgan letting us in on the life of a superstar and how taxing it is on one's body and mind. I'm a huge fan of this track. I love the subtle acoustic riffs in the chorus and the driving beat helping surround you in the idea of this always on the move lifestyle. Last point on Livin the Dream, I really like how there's no harmonies at all, anywhere. It really helps convey this lonely feeling the song is trying to get across. And just like that, we're at the true end of Dangerous. Quttin Time, an Eric Church co-write that does not disappoint in any category. I simply couldn't have asked for a better closer. Morgan, when fully acoustic, sounds so gorgeous. The dialed-back production lets you focus in on Morgan's pitch and tone-perfect voice. It's just a good note to end the album on. With so much anticipation, it just seems like a fitting way to send off the listener. I know at 3 a.m. when I had finished listening to it with Tom and Claire on the Discord, it was a real goosebumps moment, but I have more on that later. It's a simple chord progression, simple song about how everything has to come to an end, and a relationship just happens to be the focus. But it works and feels like a designated closer to this specific album, especially with lines about Morgan trying to get a last word in before the credits roll. Just a calming, perfect closer that really lays the album to rest. It also ensures that even if you weren't a huge fan of the second album, you leave the cohesive project with a good taste in your mouth. So, album 2. Held its own very well. I was really concerned this album would be a complete flop, and the truth is I want Morgan to succeed. I want all artists to succeed. I want to like their music. But just seeing some of those titles got me concerned, and though yes, there are more duds than the first album, this record is still strong in my opinion. I think Morgan found a nice balance of stupid, sentimental, and fun. I'm really glad he explored different party sounds like Need a Boat and even on Country Yada Yada, where we get some funkier twang that just sounds great. I'm hoping some of those funkier songs take off so we can get more of them in the future, but realistically speaking, it's songs like Somethin Country that'll probably take off, just because they're the easiest to throw on a summer playlist without thinking about it. So to conclude, I know I've probably rambled on for about as long as the album itself, but the truth is releases this big don't come around often, so I want to make sure I say everything that needs saying, because it's albums like this that are a real checkpoint in a genre, an album you can look back on that defines a moment in time. I can't see anything in the near future being as big as this here album, so without further ado, here are my closing thoughts as a music critic and a fan. As a music critic, I think this album is solid. Yes, there are duds or duller moments, but on a project as ambitious and large as this, it's easier to see past them, and there's not nearly enough dull moments on here to make the argument a double album wasn't necessary. I'm actually glad it's a double album because it allowed Morgan to go more in depth and further down each avenue he touched on. Rather than getting moments of different ideas and genres, we get full stretches of multiple songs really letting him dive deep. It just enhances the experience of both. And furthermore, if we got a more compact single album, we probably would have missed out on tracks like Silverado for Sale, Need a Boat, and Whiskey My Way. One thing this album did really well was the percussion. Especially in the first album, the way the percussion was used was incredibly fitting and witty. All credit here goes to Joe from the Discord, who basically put my clouded thoughts into words. He said the percussion is used as an instrument, not just a timekeeper. The percussion on this album just stands out. From the more anthemic marching style percussion found on many tracks, to the other just unique uses of different percussive instruments. There's so many detailed drumming parts and they're so prominent, yet they mixed it in a way that prevents the drums from taking the spotlight or hindering another instrument's presence on the track. The production team found a perfect balance to do what a lot of albums ultimately fail to do when incorporating more drums into their music. Another aspect worth mentioning is the vocal performances from Morgan. He really pushed himself further. He went for bigger notes, more ambitious melodies that would require more technical application when it comes to breathing patterns and pronunciations. There's some falsettos on here which are really nice. It's also worth saying how Morgan held his own with only 2 features. Especially from a solo artist, it's not rare to see 2 to 4 features on a 12-track album, so he held his own and ensured the listeners didn't get bored of him over the course of a 30-track record, which is a real testament to his contagious personality. Songwriting-wise, though there are obvious duds, I appreciate that we got a lot more storytelling on this album, and that even on simpler songs, Morgan still made them interesting and unique, like they aren't just another song on a public country playlist. There's also just interesting lines scattered all over this album, just terms that you don't hear very often, just add that little extra flavor to the track. Like on More Surprised Than Me, when he's saying the extent to which people can be gullible, he says, "I can tell them I've got pirate blood or ancient royalty." It's just something different, and just plain different can go a long way in an industry as saturated as that of music. This is no Zach Bryan album that'll knock your socks off for the writing, but that's not what you should be expecting from an album that will be heard by so many people. I think Morgan served up a good balance of detailed and interesting lyrics to follow that can also be easily processed by the casual listener. One thing I think was missing was bridges in a lot of these songs. Most of these tracks are 2.5 to 3 minutes, simply because there's no bridge. That said, it does help with the already lengthy runtime of the album. I just think it could have let some of the quicker paced tracks take a breather, maybe get an instrumental break every now and then. Lastly, there's a very distinct sound to this record. Just the way the instruments were recorded and mixed was really smart. You'll especially notice the acoustic guitars are much brighter and sharper after production. What this does is it makes a Morgan Wallen song easily recognizable. Simply by the style, it's easy to pick out when it's a Morgan song. So from a marketing standpoint, I think this is a really smart move. So, did Dangerous live up to the incomprehensible hype and pressure? I think it absolutely did, and then some. Like I said, even when Morgan was dumber, he did it in a much more likable and less obnoxious manner. I think this album blends genres better than any country album we've heard in a while. Some of the best R&B country blends I've ever heard can be found in the first half of this project. It's also just nice how they open and close the album. A lot of albums either take a while to get going, or end too abruptly or too dragged out. Though I said the second album suffers from one of these problems, the cohesive double album starts and finishes better than I could have imagined, which I think is important. You want to hook the listener from the beginning and send them off feeling good about what they just experienced. Now, what a lot of you have probably been waiting for, what would I rate this album out of 10? I don't normally give decimals, but seeing how long this album is, I think it warrants me bringing decimals into the picture. All things considered, from my critical frame of mind, I would give this album a 7.9. It's just barely less than an 8. This album has some of the best moments we will probably get from 2021, but at the end of the day, you look at songs like Beer Don't and Somethin Country, and those will inevitably tack your score down a little. Really quickly before this video ends, now that I've given my 2 cents as a music reviewer, I want to give some quick thoughts as a fan. Dangerous has been one hell of a ride to be a part of. From the original lockdown when Morgan was releasing demos and acoustic performances, to the 7 Summers drop, the Triple November drop, and then to the final album. He built up the anticipation amongst his fans, and it was just a blast to be a part of. I felt like a 12-year-old girl the night before Harry Styles drops literally anything. That's how I felt, like a child. But it's the way Morgan is connected with his fans over the past little while that sets him apart, in my opinion. The way he uses social media so cleverly, you feel like you know Morgan personally, and with a personality as charismatic as his, it's easier for him to get away with more stuff. Obviously, I had to separate myself from my normal frame of mind to review this, so that I didn't give a biased review, but personally speaking, I would give this album closer to a 9 or 9.5. Other than maybe Beer Don't and Outlaw, there's not really anything I would skip. It's like how my parents tell me about waiting outside the stores in long lines to get their favorite band's new album. This is what I'll be telling my kids. Locked inside during a pandemic, pacing around the house until midnight, being a part of the stream that just got you more hyped like a kid on Christmas, and then ultimately being up till 3 a.m. on Discord listening to it. So, Morgan, you aren't watching this, but if you are, thank you for creating this journey for people like myself to be a part of, and I can't wait for what's next in his career. With that, I'm going to conclude this crazy long video. I've done my future editing self 0 favors with this specific review, but I got everything I wanted to say across, and I'm happy with this review. I hope you enjoyed. If you're new and enjoyed this review, I would encourage you to subscribe for more similar content, as well as like the video to help out the YouTube algorithm a little. Unfortunately, if you're not a Morgan Wallen fan, I apologize. I got some more dangerous content coming your way. If you are a Morgan Wallen fan, buckle up, get ready. There's plenty of content regarding this subject coming while it's still hot, because I want to talk about it, and I think a lot of you guys do too. Until next time, have a great day. 36 minutes of recording. Oh my gosh.